This is called, actually this is a Steve's title, Elements of Any Learner's Path. That is that we all go through interlanguage whenever we are learning the language as learners. So interlanguage is something that we all have. It's a process that we all go through when learners. We're going to do a review for those of you who have seen it as students of what is interlanguage. So this is Larry Selinker. He came out with this concept of interlanguage in 1972. So it's been, 50 years or so since that, and there's no other theory that has come out and said, this is not true. So this is true, this came to tell us it's normal, it's okay, errors are okay, errors are part of our learning process. So interlanguage is the fact that the learner's language system is neither that of the mother tongue nor that of the second language, but contains elements from both. At the first stage, we have more of that mother tongue, and when we are in our higher level stage or stages, we have less elements from our mother tongue. So this is the definition. But something important from this definition is that it says, is the learner's language system. This is individual. Each of the learners have a very individual and particular system. So what's the difference between errors and mistakes? Next, please. So errors and mistakes. Errors are related, next please, are related to the lack of knowledge of certain items or rules. So this is the lack of knowledge. Errors is when we don't know, we don't have an idea. And remember something, this happens in first language and third language, fourth, fifth, whichever language. When we don't know it, of course, errors come up. Mistakes. Mistakes are those produced when the knowledge has already been acquired, but it also happens. These are the lapses that we have, the mistakes. So it's important to have that difference. Next, please. So this is a continuum. On those days, I used to draw it in the blackboard like that, but I found this and I liked it. So this is the learner's language process. Selinker says that this is the process. Next, please. These are the errors. Next. And this is interlanguage. And the errors, of course, we see more errors during the first stages, and it's an apparent regression when we do these. But actually, every error is a step forward in the learning process. So we start with the mother tongue towards our target language, and this is the interlanguage path. So Selinker says the learners speak an interlanguage, not that from the mother tongue, nor that from the target language precisely, but with elements from both. So that is interlanguage, and we'll see now which elements have this process. Why making errors? Next, please. So the making of errors is a strategy, evidence of the learner's internal process, which is individual and it is unpredictable. We don't even know in our own language when are we making a mistake or committing an error. So it is always unpredictable. It's the same thing happens with individual when learning a language. We never know when we are making a mistake or committing an error. Next, please. What are the types of errors? This is very important. There are systematic errors and non-systematic errors. The systematic errors are those that we're going to find more frequently in our students. The transfer of rules of the mother tongue, the overgeneralization of the second language rules, and the redundancy reduction by omitting certain elements. I see that some of your faces are like saying, now I remember. Okay, that's good. So these are the ones that, some of the theories, I'm sure that maybe Barbara talked to you about. I know what the name was. So you had Barbara here. She told you about what was Barbara's conference about?
Promoting learning autonomy.
Learning autonomy. Yes, that's great. She has written and is studying a lot about teaching awareness and the awareness of the autonomy.
Reflective teaching.
Reflective teaching, yes. And this reflective teaching also tells us that it is important to talk with our students about their errors. It's not to say you're wrong, that's bad, that's 0. But it's talking with them about what you're doing here is you're transferring the rules of your mother tongue, or what you're doing here is maybe you have to know the exception to the rules, or maybe you have to learn the past tense exceptions, or maybe you have to, you are omitting some elements that you need, that you don't have in Spanish in this case, or that you don't have in your first language, but you have to. And in the theory now tells us that when the student knows the reasons of the errors, and when they become aware of them and why they are making the errors, then it's more likely to correct them. The non-systematic errors are the communication strategies. And well, I really hope that our students make a lot of communication strategies. Because this happened a lot when in a certain stage they need to talk and they don't want to talk because they know that they don't have a very high level, so they are shy of making errors or mistakes. But the thing is that when they have to speak in English and they don't have enough elements, they come out with what they have. So these are communication strategies that we'll see. We'll see each one of these further on. And performance errors, which we have also in our own language. Go ahead, please. So the first one, first language transfer. This is central for second language learning. We as teachers, we have to know that the transferring of the first language is very normal for students in the first stages. So the first language transfer is when speaking interlanguage, as Selinger says, learners bring with them items, rules, and subsystems from their mother tongue. And we'll see an example in a minute. So can you think of some ideas or some of this kind of errors?
Yes, teacher, the classical, I have 22 years old.
Yes, I have 22 years old. That's very good. Another one?
When asking questions using the auxiliary, because in Spanish we don't use auxiliaries.
Yes, yes.
And the other one is, I am agree.
I am agree. I am agree. Yo estoy de acuerdo. I am agree, of course.
When making plurals, using apostrophe s.
Yes, yes, using the, yes, that's a classical. And, well, we know which are the classicals, no? I am embarrassed, maybe. That's okay. I am embarrassed. Really? What does the baby do? No, I'm see, that's one. That's a classical one. And so many. I think that there's so many that has made us laugh a little bit. throughout our careers. Okay, so I have this example here. It's not the old example that we had, Steve, because we made a very good one, but I made this last night and I was thinking of these examples that we all have. I'm sure that we can make a very good letter. But it is important in transfer. Robert Lado, in 1957, that's over 60 years ago, in 1957 he said that learners tend to transfer forms and meanings of their native language and culture to their foreign language and culture. The thing is that sometimes learners think that we have the same culture and the same traditions and the same thing all over the world, and it's not like that. So this is just a boyfriend that wanted to write something nice to his lovey, and so it says, "My wanted little shell." Maybe you'd know what's the name of the girl. I feel very fortunate. You picking me every day, picking me. That's you very fortunate to pick me. I touched the piano and touched the guitar also. It would have been nice to have your example, Rudy, like I have so and so, 22 years old. You are the more beautiful thing that has passed me. Never. You like eating golden tacos tonight? We all like golden tacos, don't we? I see you in the pozole shop. I love you, little skinny. You're fat. You're gordo. So that is just so fun. We can identify not only transfer errors in this letter. This letter is not only transferring first language items, but it's also transferring cultural items. Trying to translate like names like maybe Conchita, maybe picking me, because picking is like the first verbs that we learn, meaning elegir or escoger, right? Maybe touching the guitar, the piano, that had passed me, me ha pasado. Well, golden tacos, right? How else would we say it? Okay, flaquita, that's something very, very used nowadays, even. There we are. So that's just an example of this language transfer, of the mother tongue, culture, and of course, language. Okay, next, overgeneralization. I don't know if you can read the drawing here. So the boy says, I put the plates on the table. You mean I put the plates on the table? No, I put them on all by myself. He's very angry, and because no, I put them by myself. So this is very common. We assume this is the mother, but maybe this could happen to us as teachers. It's very important how we correct, right? But it's okay. I think that's a good way to correct. But this is a classical overgeneralization error. So we all generalize when we are learning in order to make sense of our world. We also do that in our first language. I remember that one of my sons, when he was very little, I said, go and see if your brother, I'm going to say it in Spanish, le dije, ve a ver si tu hermano está dormido. So he went and came back y me dijo, está despertado. So this is overgeneralization because he said dormido y despertado. That's the logical part. So that is in order to make sense of a world. This skill helps us to predict how items will behave. However, sometimes our predictions are wrong. Next, please. How do we overgeneralize? This is another example. So we say this is a bird and it flies. This one flies too. Is it a bird? No. Next, please. Oh, this is a bird, but it doesn't fly. So what happens? Next, please. So we must learn an exception to a general rule or reallocate it if the item belongs to a different category. In this case, the different category is a bat. It flies, but it's not a bird. So, and this is another example when our learners generalize a lot. I see 2 mouses. Why not? Oh, women's, oh, feet, oh, shoes, children, right? So these mice and women and teeth and so on are the exception to the plural rules. So what is it there? We have to learn the exceptions in order not to overgeneralize, right? So that's another very common error along with first language transfer. Next one, please. These are simplification by omission, or also redundancy reduction, or also known as baby talk. The learner, and this is in the very, very first stages, the learner eliminates many items which are redundant to communicate the intended message. The thing is to elicit them to talk. It doesn't matter if they make these errors. So, for example, next please. Our learners can say things like, is ball, I happy. You said one very good child now. I hungry. I am agree. What eat? Right? And this happens in the first stages because it's the omission of the correct elements, maybe because we don't have them in our knowledge, or because we don't know how to use them, or lack of practice or something. But it is another type of error, the simplification by omission of this of the systematic errors. Now we go to communication strategies, which are the non-systematic errors. Communication strategies, anything is good, as long as you communicate the meaning of what you want to say. So when learners try to express a meaning for which they do not have the appropriate item of rules at all, the learner improvises to solve the immediate problem. And we all have gone through that, right? Whenever we are maybe giving a class or talking to someone, to a native speaker, or to someone who is not a Spanish speaker, and we don't have the word, we improvise with mimics, with water, yes, the bottle. I'm sure that we all have had experiences like that, right? So even before a person has begun to learn a language, it is possible to communicate by using individual items from a dictionary or a phrase book, or with gestures. If you are talking to, let's say, I don't know, a Japanese person, and he or she does not speak any Spanish nor English, and you don't speak Japanese, how do you communicate? just using mimic. You search for strategies. These are also individual strategies. And you get along and you communicate. Children do this perfectly and wonderfully. So these are the communication strategies. Anything is good. Anything is valid as long as you convey the meaning of your message. Next, please. So the slips of the tongue, the performance errors. These type of errors appear regularly in speech, and of course they come in any language. First language too. They become performance mistakes when the learner can recognize them and correct them by her himself afterwards. Usually we say, I mean, que diga, right? In Spanish or in English or in any language. So these are also called slips of the tongue. Performance errors, we make them. We know that they are wrong, and we correct them immediately afterwards. So we have the tongue twisted. Next, please. Other types of errors. Non-systematic and systematic we have seen so far. But other errors due to the effect of faulty teaching. This is important to know. This usually happens when a learner is taking part of formal instruction. Some errors will be a direct result of misunderstanding caused by incorrect teaching or materials. And this is important, especially in the beginning levels and with children. Who teaches children here? Like small children. It's so nice, it's beautiful, congratulations. Because it is. But what happens with children? Whatever you tell them, they believe you, right? So, and again, I'm sorry, I talk about my kids because it's the only example I have, but I remember that when Rodrigo was small, he said, Wednesday, and he was like in third grade primary, Wednesday, and I said, no, it's Wednesday. No, Wednesday, Mama. La Miss dijo. So what happens? It was a faulty teaching there. It's a mistake. So let's just be aware that for little children, we have that responsibility, that we are this example, and also with adults. Beginners believe what we are telling them because we are supposed to have this knowledge in every aspect of the language. So these are errors, of course, that can be overcome through time, but there are errors, however. Okay, next please. Next one. Fossilization. These are errors that have become permanent features of the learner's performance, written or spoken. There are some theories that say that they cannot be corrected, never. Some theories say that with time and with effort and study of the learner. And fossilized errors can be found also in native speakers of any language. What happens, for example, I don't know, people from Toluca, my mom among them, they say zanahoria. Zanahoria. And I tell her, no es zanahoria, no es zanahoria. Sí, por eso zanahoria. And that's a fossilized error in Spanish. That's just an example. So what happens maybe in writing also? Some people, can have the fossilized error of writing, I don't know, deseo with S, with C. So that's fossilized. But in English, it happens. We can see very high-level students that have a fossilized error. And they know it, and they try to correct it, and sometimes they do, and sometimes they know. Sometimes in pronunciation, we are looking a lot to sound like native speakers, and we pronounce and think that we have fossilized certain, it's just not well pronounced item. And well, these are the other errors. So we have interlanguage, systematic, non-systematic errors. The systematic are the transfer, the overgeneralization, the simplification, the non-systematic are the communication strategies, and the performance errors. And the other errors are the faulty teaching errors and the fossilization errors. So let's do some error analysis, because error analysis is not error correction. It is analyzing the causes and the possible reasons of the errors that the learners make throughout the process of learning a second language. But analyze these with them, with your students. Learning a second language has many, many similarities with the process of learning the mother tongue, of course in different contexts. However, the context of learning in both cases is widely different. So this is it. This is interlanguage and the errors committed throughout interlanguage. And next one, please. Thank you very much. That's my email. If you have any questions or comments, I would really highly appreciate. And I am ready for any questions or comments that you might have. Thank you.